Hey guys, welcome to Game 12 of the World Chess Championship 2010. This game is played between Vaselin Topalov and Vishy Anand. The current scores are 5.5 each, and this is the final game of the classical round. If this ends in a draw, then we go into the rapid section. And this is a wonderful picture at the start of the game. We have both the players shaking hands, not looking at each other, but that's pretty common. And again, these photos have been taken from the internet. I do not claim that these photos are mine. We have another picture here of both the players writing down the moves and or maybe just writing down their details because none of the moves have been played in this on the board that we can see. So with that information, let's get into the game. We have d4 by Vaselin Topalov as he has the white pieces and Vishy has the black pieces. We have d5 in response and c4. This is the queen's gambit, and after e6, this is the queen's gambit declined. If you capture this pawn, then it's queen's gambit accepted, and if you just play e6, it's queen's gambit declined. We have knight to f3 and knight to f6. Both players develop, trying to keep control over these two squares, and now knight to c3, the three-knight variation of the queen's gambit declined. We have bishop to e7, developing move. Now Anand is ready to castle, and bishop to g5, trying to either capture this knight, or if this bishop moves, just spinning this knight. We have h6, attacking the bishop, immediately asking what do you want to do. Bishop to h4, retreating with the bishop, and castles by Anand. We have e3, solidifying this d4 pawn, and knight to e4. Now this is the Lasker variation. Pretty interesting variation, or you could also call it as a Lasker's defense. Now after that we have bishop takes e7, finally getting rid of the bishop, since this opened up an attack on the bishop, and if you just move the bishop, you're going to get knight captures on this bishop and you ruin your pawn structure. So not allowing that to happen, Topalov decides to get the dark square bishops off the board. And we have queen takes e7, rook to c1 and c6. Just a developing move, putting some more defense to this d5 pawn. Bishop to e2, developing move, and knight takes c3 first. You have a couple of options, either you can capture with the rook or you can capture with the pawn. Either of them have been played before. Rook takes c3, capturing with the rook, not getting rid of this pawn structure, and d takes c4. Now finally, you always, as black, you have to remember, you have to make sure that the bishop develops first and only then allow it to capture, because that way you have to make bishop moves twice, and it's just an advantage for you. You just get a free move. So bishop takes c4 and knight to d7. We have castles here finally by white, and b6. Again, putting some attack to the square. Anand is definitely going to push this c pawn. That's his plan. Bishop to d3, now retreating, not allowing this pawn push to come with an attack, if there is one. And also, Topalov wants to just put this bishop on this wonderful diagonal and not allowing this pawn to be pushed. At least that's what he thinks. But we have c5, immediately pushing the pawn. And bishop to e4, now attacking the rook. So the smart move is to just move the rook, and that's what Anand does. Rook to b8, moving the rook, getting out of the attack. Now we have queen to c2. Again, you can either go for a check and then the king moves, and then you can even go in with the knight. Not right now. You have to go here first and then try to create some weaknesses. But since you don't have a dark square bishop, you cannot really sacrifice on this h6 square. That was not played in the game. So after c2, we have knight to f6, an amazing move by Anand, not allowing this bishop to keep the control of this wonderful diagonal that's open. So immediately attacking it, and now you have just if you want to keep protecting this diagonal, you have to move your bishop to c6 square, and then you can just put your queen here, attack it even further, and then it has to go back. So not allowing any of those complications. Just d takes c5, just some complications, and knight takes e4, getting rid of the bishop, because eventually he wanted to give it up, so why not. Queen takes e4, and now b takes c5. What Anand did here was he voluntarily went into this weaker c pawn, and now Topalov just finds a nice idea, either bring the queen back or put the queen here and attack this piece. You are definitely going to capture it eventually. So queen to c2, now double attacking this pawn as the rook is attacking and the queen is attacking, and you just have one defender. So bishop to b7, and Anand says fine, I mean this piece is eventually, I'm losing this piece, so at least if you try to capture, I'm going to ruin your pawn structure by getting this bishop captures here on the knight, and then you'll have to recapture with your pawn, ruining the pawn structure. So knight to d2, not allowing that to happen, but by this knight to d2 move, this bishop now controls the entire diagonal, and there is nothing white can do about it, because he doesn't have a light square bishop to contest this black's light square bishop. So rook f to d8, now simply putting some pressure on this d pawn, the d file knight, and also getting control of this only open file on the board. We have f3, now blocking this bishop from attacking this backward pawn, and no checkmate threats, because if you move the queen here to g5, and then there will be some threat of checkmate. So bishop to a6, now attacking this rook. Rook to f2, and now rook to d7. All Anand wants to do is double up the rooks on this open d file. He's not even trying to protect this pawn, because it's not worth it. He knows eventually it's going to be captured. We have g3, and now rook b to d8, doubling up the rooks on the open file, keeping an eye on this d file. King to g2, and bishop to d3, now attacking the queen, asking what do you want to do. Queen to c1 and bishop to a6 back. Here Anand wants to repeat the moves, and if queen to c2 was played, that means Topalov was agreeing to a threefold repetition, which would have followed like bishop to d3, again queen to c1, bishop to a6, queen to c2, and bishop to d3, and this would have been a draw. But Topalov did not really want to go for the draw, because if you draw this game, then you have to enter into the rapid section, where Anand is much better. So Topalov knew this, and that Anand is better in rapid chess, and he was hoping to find a way to get a win here. He was pushing for a win. So after bishop to a6, not going to this variation again, he instead plays rook to a3, letting Anand know that he is playing for a win here. And Anand says, fine, if that's what you want, then I'm just going to play bishop to b7. Now if you attack this backward pawn here, then it's a mistake, because rook takes a7. If you take it, then bishop takes f3 with check. Now you have to capture this bishop. Rook takes f3, and now you give up this rook. Rook takes a7. This is complete advantage black. So you don't really want to capture that. So after bishop to b7, not capturing the pawn, but instead knight to b3. Opening up an attack, and finally he's ready to capture this pawn. This pawn has been sitting there as a target for a long time, and Topalov has not been able to capitalize on it. So rook to c7, now finally defending. Since now your rook is not attacking the pawn, it's okay to defend. Knight to a5, now attacking the bishop. Bishop to a8, simply getting out of the way, keeping a control over this wonderful file, this diagonal. Knight to c4, and now e5. Immediately Anand is looking for some expansions here, and he is now ready to open up these e and f files. e4, blocking this attack of this wonderful bishop. But now f5, Anand immediately counters it and says, I'm not going to allow you to keep blocking these files. I am definitely going to open up some files. So e takes f5. It would have been better if you let Anand capture it and then either capture with the bishop or capture with the pawn. So you should have just played to rook to e2 and have had a wonderful game. But then Topalov decides against it. Topalov thinks that he could definitely play for an advantage here, and e4 is played. Now, what do? Do you capture this and allow this either the queen or the bishop to come in here and give a check, and leave your king completely hopeless? What do? Topalov didn't really have a plan, so he played f takes e4, queen takes e4, and king to h3. Here Topalov doesn't know yet, but he is in a big trouble, mainly because now this queen, these two rooks are coming into the attack via this way, or just putting it here and attacking this piece, and this pawn is pretty weak, so it's definitely falling. And this pawn is nicely controlling these two squares, so Topalov should have captured it when he had the opportunity. Now rook to d4. The threat here is queen to g4 with checkmate, because this square will be covered and you won't be able to attack your queen, so you have to defend it. Knight to e3. Also this knight was attacked, so moving the knight and covering this square. But this is what Topalov missed, queen to e8. This was the biggest threat in this position, which is what gave Anand the great advantage. And Anand found it because he had a lot of time on the clock. This was a perfect move. Now again, queen is coming to g5 with again a threat of checkmate. So you have to defend this threat. g4 is played, just defending the threat. But now h5. So now the pawn is being threatened. If you capture the pawn, then you can run away with your king, but not for too long. We have king to h4, and now g5 check. We have f takes g6 en passant, and queen takes g6. Now the queen is coming into this square, this square, and this bishop is nicely controlling this diagonal. The rook is controlling this, and it's all over. Queen to f1, Topalov tries to defend the position, and rook takes g4 check. Again, you cannot take the rook, because if you take the rook with the knight, you have queen takes g4 with checkmate. But that's not going to happen. After rook takes g4, we have king to h3, trying to get away from, of course, first the check, and there is no other square for it to move. So from here we have rook to e7. Now getting the second rook, attacking this knight. Also, once the knight moves, you're going to get it into the attack of the king. And even though there is a threat of this check, and that's exactly what Topalov plays, rook to f8 check. Now once you move your king, you're going to pick up this bishop, but Anand says, sure, go for the bishop, I'm just going in for the kill, and you will be checkmated soon. King to g7, and now knight to f5 check. King to h7, and rook to g3. Now again, trying to defend these pieces, you cannot go capturing this hanging bishop, because then you will be checkmated even sooner. So none of that was played, and rook to g3 check. Rook takes g3. H takes g3, and now queen to g4 check. Again, it's protected, it's defended. Now there's only one square for the king, and that's h2. So king to h2. Rook to e2 check, getting the other rook into the game, and king to g1. Rook to g2 check, and finally you're going to pick up this queen because now you have to capture it with the queen. If you try to move away with your king, this is what happens. King to h1 if you try to move away. Now you get rook to f2 with a discovered check. Again, you cannot capture this piece because your queen is hanging and it's better to capture the rook than a bishop. So you have to move the king, and now you just get rook captures, and after captures you can even try to capture this. Actually it's black to move, so I'm just going to play whatever I feel like, just putting my bishop here. There is nothing you can do actually in this position. So after rook to g2, you have to take it with the queen, so queen takes g2 and bishop takes g2, finally getting rid of your queen, and king takes g2. Now if you count the material, you have 3 pawns against 3 pawns, but white king is pretty exposed, and you have a queen against a knight and a rook. There is nothing white can do here. This rook can never leave this f file because he has to keep an eye on this knight all the time. So if you want to move, you have to first move the knight, and only then will you be able to move your rook. And again, if you move the knight, black will simply give you checks, pick up these pawns, and then convert this pawn into a queen. So king to e2 check, king to h3, c4. Since you have a pass pawn, you have to keep pushing it, and a4 now. Topalov has his own pawn, so he wants to push them further. a5. Now rook to f6, trying to get some activity going, but it's of no use, and it's all over for him. Of course, you cannot move the king. This is the only place he can stay, because then queen is again going to give you a check. From here you can move away, and then queen will start picking up your pawns. Again, after check, pick up these pawns. So king to g8, black moves his king, so now getting some security, not allowing any checkmate ideas. Knight to h6 check, and king to g7, now attacking both these pieces. Finally the rook has to move, but it has to keep an eye on this knight, so it can move only on this 6th file. Rook to b6, keeping an eye on this b2 pawn, protecting it, and queen to e4. Just centralizing the queen, and king to h2. King to h7, now rook to d6. Queen to e5, attacking this rook and also attacking this pawn here, and knight to f7. We have queen takes b2 and king to h3 with check. Of course, this came with check, and queen to g7. So this was the final position, as Topalov realized there is nothing else he can do. He has to keep an eye on these two pieces that he has, and this pawn is going to be pretty quick, and in just 3 moves it's going to queen. So either you have to give up one of these pieces for this pawn, and then it will be all over, or black just gets another queen into the game and it's all over. So after this position, that is in position 56, Topalov resigned, and Viswanathan Anand was declared the winner of 2010 World Chess Championship. He defended his title. He won the title in 2008 and defended it in 2010. His next opponent will probably be Magnus Carlsen, and since this has already happened in the past, we know it was Magnus Carlsen. I'll just show you why Topalov resigned in the next few moves. He can move knight to h6. Now we get queen takes h6, rook takes h6, king takes h6, and king to h4. c3, g4, h takes g4, king takes g4, and c2. We have king to f4 and queen to c1, king to e4, queen to c4 check, king to e5, and queen to a4. That's all over for Topalov. He realized that this is exactly what is going to happen, and he does not have an alternative but to resign. So as soon as he resigned, they called the arbiter and they shook hands. Topalov started explaining that he completely misjudged this position, and the queen to e6 move was pretty amazing, and I'm sorry, queen to e8 move was pretty amazing, and that's what he failed to calculate. This move from here back, queen back to e8. And from there, queen is rerouting itself towards the king, and there is nothing Topalov could have done. He realized that as soon as Anand played, he realized that this was a losing position, and he explained it to Anand as soon as the game was over. So, a wonderful victory for Anand after all that he went through, 40 days of travel by road, being stuck at the airport during the start of the tournament. The first game he was 1-0 down because it was later realized that Bulgarian Defense Department gave Topalov the supercomputer to find the line which he defeated Anand with. And after all of this, still both players showed amazing sportsmanship. And in the post-tournament interview, this is what Anand said, and I quote, "My opponent is a fantastic fighter. Either of us could have won this match. This was by far the most intense match I have ever played. And when I woke up this morning, I thought that this could be the saddest day of my life or the happiest day. I have almost no experience in the World Chess Championship match where every result is possible on the final game. I am not unhappy that it would be over soon." So pretty amazing interview there. And this interview is also available online, so if you guys wish, you could check it out. I hope you enjoyed this saga. This concludes our World Chess Championship 2010, the saga of 12 matches. And that's it from me. Namaste. See you next time.